All right. So Sean Fain, who is the president of the UAW, just threw out a dig at the CEO of Ford. And he said that maybe Ford doesn't need to move factories to find the cheapest labor on earth. Maybe it needs to recommit to American workers and find a CEO who's interested in the future of this country's auto industry. I think it's very interesting because this comes on the heels of Jim Farley of Ford talking about the disconnect that their UAW the UA the UAW auto the auto messing up here. The UAW, there's been a disconnect between them and Ford over the last what year or so because they've been in these strikes because Ford got hit the worst of all three of the auto manufacturers that the UAW hit. And what Jim Farley came out and said was he said this is going to make us rethink where we're going to actually build our vehicles and where we're going to have production. And what comes to mind is Mexico. So if they move a lot of these plants to Mexico, it's going to hit a lot of the labor that Ford employs in the U.S. And this is what Sean Fain is responding to, is saying that, you know what, maybe we don't need to find different place to make these cars. Maybe we need to find a different CEO whose focus is not on cheap labor, but in the future of the auto industry, the better quality coming out of Ford, things like that. Ford has had a big problem as far as their quality in the last. I mean, for the recent past, but a lot in the last 3 years, we've seen recalls after recalls after recalls stack up, and you can show here we have a comment saying how many recalls has Ford had in the last few years. And what I will say to that is all the recalls, like they're the number one most recalled brand across the space. And here we go. Ford recalls is job one. So we it's comical to talk about Ford quality just because it has been so bad in the recent past, and it doesn't look like they're making any changes right now to make anything better. And it really falls down on the CEO, right? It falls down on management to make sure that they're going through the right checks, they're going through the right processes to make sure that that quality is better coming out of the factories. And this is going to hurt the brand going forward because when you look at the quality that's coming out of Ford and you compare it to other brands, you know that Ford, they're not known for their quality right now. So if there's a consumer that's on the fence between Ford and something like a Toyota or a Honda or even one of the other big three manufacturers, and they go and start looking at quality ratings, they go and start looking at recalls, then they're probably not going to Ford. And then on top of all these quality issues that Ford's dealing with, they're having this big hit in the EV space right now, and it just keeps getting worse for them. So recently, now we're seeing that Ford has had to cut their Mach-E's up to $8,100, and we know that the EV space is one that Ford has invested a ton of money into. I know over the last year they've lost about $4.3 billion in this space, and for every EV that they sell, they're losing $36,000. And now that they're having to lower the prices to stay competitive with a brand like Tesla, where they're going to have to make their products basically cheaper than Tesla because the quality is not going to be better than Tesla. The technology is not going to be better than what Tesla is putting out. So they have to lower their prices. So that $36,000 number that they're losing on each and every EV is going to do nothing but to go up. And after these cuts is absolutely going to go up. And we've already seen that in the last couple quarters, they've had to lower their prices a lot on their Lightnings. And if you go to any Ford dealership right now, if you go out, even if you're driving by, you're going to see Mach-E's and Ford Lightnings sitting everywhere. I know you've seen other YouTube videos that have shown Ford lots, and there's Mach-E's just stacked up everywhere. So much so that these dealers are they're complaining to Ford, saying that, okay, what are you going to do for us to help us actually move these Mach-E's? And even as they're lowering these prices and making them competitive with a product like Tesla, people still aren't buying them, and we're finding that they just don't want them. They don't want to move over to one the EV space. They're not ready for it. The infrastructure is not there. There's a lot of people that are worried about it. Anyway, and the people that are the early adopters, they're buying the Teslas. So Ford's got a long way to go if they're going to make a name in this EV space, and they're just not doing it right now. And yeah, we're seeing this even with the Mavericks, the cheaper trucks that everybody wants. Mark is saying that yes, my Maverick is cheap and it has 6 recalls so far, and that's a big problem that Ford is going to have to address with the quality, and something that really, I mean, Sean Fain can kind of lean into too, is that say, okay, well, you're worried about the labor, the cost of labor. Well, you really need to be worried about the quality, and if you're wanting to move production to somewhere else, then he can argue that maybe the quality is even going to get worse if you're moving your production out of this country. And I want to hit on that the Ford Maverick too, just real quick. And this is a big problem that we've seen with Ford too, is that they're leaning into the F-150s as far as production goes, and moving away from a lot of the production in the Ford Mavericks. But what we know is that these dealerships, they can sell the Ford Mavericks, they can sell a $25,000 to $35,000 little truck, but they're having a hard time right now selling these 70, 80, $90,000 trucks. And the reason why Ford keeps pumping money and pumping production into making these F-150s is because obviously per vehicle, they're going to make a lot more on these F-150s. And it almost doesn't matter to Ford whether the customer right now is buying them. What it matters to Ford is that the dealerships are buying them. And that's why you can see these manufacturers turn in record profits, even in a time period where you're seeing all over the news, you're seeing all over YouTube right now that dealers are having a really hard time moving vehicles, but the manufacturers are still doing good. And the reason why is because the manufacturers, they don't make money when they sell a truck to me or you, a consumer, when the vehicle is bought off the dealer lot. That's when the dealer is able to make money. The manufacturer is a wholesaler. So Ford, they make money when they move their vehicles to these dealer lots, when these dealers take these allocations. And as we've known that these dealers have had to try to load back up on their inventory, get back to field from the last 3 years where production was slow, and now they're getting to a point where they're filled up. Okay, so they are not selling a lot of vehicles. So now at this point, they're going to start turning down allocations, and we're already seeing reports of it more heavily in the like Stellantis, and less in GM, and Ford's kind of right in that middle range. But with the F-150s, they're getting to a point where they can't take them anymore. And more importantly, with the Mach-E's, they're getting to a point where they don't even want any more of them. And the way that Ford is able to still get these Mach-E's, these Ford Lightnings to these dealers is they have to package them with other allocations. So if a dealership wants something that they can sell, something like a Maverick, if they want more of those Mavericks, then they're going to have to take some Mach-E's. They're going to have to take some more F-150s with this allocation to make the manufacturer, make their distributors happy, and get rid of some of those vehicles that other dealers might not want if they want the more desirable vehicles. And this is a way that these manufacturers can move a lot of this less desirable vehicles to these dealers, and then the dealers are kind of stuck with the bill on them. And there's going to be a lot of floor plans that these dealers have to going to have to pay on a lot of these vehicles that are sitting, especially the EVs on the Ford side. So let's go to a few of these questions. Let's see here. Lightning and Mach-E would be tough sell right now with a $20,000 discount. Yeah, and we'll see here. Mach-E, if they just dropped it $8,100, I think that was they had another like $8,000 price drop maybe like 6 to 12 months ago that they were trying to get these things down. So even with all of that discount on these Mach-E's, they're still not moving them. They're still not selling them. So they're probably still another $10,000 to $20,000 away from people even looking at these Mach-E's, and then you get to build quality of them. I mean, I know I've seen reports over the last like 12 months talking about the Mach-E's, the way that they were built. They had like an extra, I think, 12 feet worth of wire that was in them that they did not need in these things. It's just a lot of things were rushed out in the last few years. And these EVs, they were rushed out even probably more than a lot of the ICE vehicles because the technology just wasn't there yet. So there was this big craze in the stock market. Everything was moving towards EVs. I mean, you've seen the way that Tesla stock has moved in the last 3 or 4 years, and that's on the back of this new technology and on the back of the administration wanting to push towards the EV future, and where the stock market thinks that the automotive space is going, everyone's going to be driving EVs. And because of that, more money was pumped into the sector. And Ford's the easiest example of all the big three is that they're spending so much money developing these EVs, and then they spend all this money. They get them out to dealers. They're like, oh, this is going to be a great thing. We got all these orders, and people are going to want these Lightnings. And guess what? Nobody bought them. So I wonder. I'd be very curious to hear what happens in these boardroom meetings these Ford boardroom meetings where like, okay, we pumped all this money into these EVs. Now we're losing $36,000 on each one that we get out to dealers. Uh-oh. And it's just going to continue because they can't say, okay, the EV space is a failure and we need to stop making them now, because that's going to absolutely tank their stock price. And another thing, they would be worried about getting left behind, because as you see from every one of these manufacturers, they're leaning into their EVs. They're trying to push out EVs. And the ones that you're seeing that are really more successful right now, that are making a lot of money, that are not having problems with their dealers, somewhere like Honda, somewhere like Toyota, they haven't been as fast to push out these EVs, and they've been leaning a little bit more into the hybrid. And I really think that's going to be your bridge between getting people from the ICE vehicles to these EVs, is to have something kind of in the middle. And hybrids is kind of where Toyota is really making its money right now. And I think a lot of these other manufacturers, I'm hoping, are going to get with that program and know that a lot of people are not ready for these EVs. The infrastructure is not ready, especially when you're looking at people that are let's say that they're at the lower end of our economic spectrum as far as the economy goes. They're not going to be able to get into an EV because they either live in an apartment or they live in a place where they just don't have chargers readily available. They don't have garages. So if they're parking their cars on the streets, then they're going to have to go to a charger to actually charge their vehicle. And when you get into places like that, what I've seen come across the news is that there can be long, long lines that form with these things. And it doesn't get to a thing where it's just like, okay, you go to a gas station, it's not the same because there are not as many EV chargers out there as there are these the gas stations. So it's just not a reality for a lot of people in America. And I think that Ford, they went too quick to try to push out something that wasn't tested. And they just said, okay, this is just going to work. And they threw out all these EVs. And guess what? People didn't buy them. So let's look at something else. Have we noticed an erratic drop on the cars at auction? Right now, as far as the car market goes, we're not seeing a massive drop. We've seen wholesale prices come down, but on the retail side, prices are staying pretty steady, and that's because we're about to have tax time pop the system, and really, you're not going to have dealers drop a lot of their prices yet, because they're waiting for they're waiting for tax checks to come in. And I know a lot of people are saying that tax money is not going to be as good this year, and it might not be. And if it's not, a lot of these dealers are going to be stuck with inventory. But we'll get back to Ford. So Ford isn't only sticking it to us, but also their dealers. And yeah, almost right now the dealers are getting hurt more than consumers are. And really, because dealers are getting hurt in three ways. So we know prices are really high on the new car side because manufacturers, their MSRPs have risen to the highest point that they've ever been. On top of that, you have interest rates that are way higher than they have been over the last few years. And then because interest rates are high, you have consumers that aren't being approved for loans because the monthly payments are too high. And you have dealer floor plans that are costing way more than they have been over the last 3 years. So early on in 2021, 2022, dealers were actually using their floor plans as a line of profit because interest rates were really low and they were selling cars very quickly. So any of the floor plan assistance that they were getting from the manufacturer, they really weren't having to need it, so they could just pocket that money. But now the floor plan assistance that a lot of these dealers get, they're going over that amount. So that profit item that was for these dealers is now becoming a big expense. And as these dealers keep these vehicles for longer on their lot, they have to pay more money in these floor plans each and every month. And what I hear a lot of people say in the comments is, well, why don't they just cut bait? I mean, they know that they're going to be paying a lot of money on these floor plans month after month after month. Why not just cut it by $10,000 and sell it right now? Well, what a lot of these franchise managers they have to look at is that, okay, well, I can cut just about everything by $10,000 right now and I'll sell it all and get it off my floor plan and we can just get our allocation and start over again. So they'll take a loss of $10,000 on a vehicle, or they say, well, it's only costing me $500 to floor it again for another month. So you know what? Why don't I just pay that $500 and lose that $500 right now instead of losing that $10,000 immediately, and kick the can down the road, and hopefully they'll just be that magic customer that comes in and takes this problem off of my hands, and maybe I can negotiate with them a little bit and only lose $3,000 or $4,000 as opposed to cutting it $10,000. And that's what a lot of managers are having to look at right now in this environment is, okay, well, we just kind of floated a little bit. And you think about it like maybe a consumer that's looking at their credit card bills too, is like, okay, well, do I keep just paying these minimum payments or pay a big chunk? Well, I can pay this $22 and just keep floating this credit, and instead of paying a big chunk off and working down my debt. And that's usually what a lot of consumers will do, is they'll just pay the minimum payments, let it float. Okay, we'll worry about it later. That's what you're seeing a lot of dealers do right now. And obviously we all know it's going to bite them in the end, but it's very difficult in that situation for these dealers when they have hundreds and hundreds of cars to decide, okay, I'm going to lose millions of dollars right now because I'm going to cut all my prices, or we lose thousands of dollars and just kick the can down the road. And I can't say that I blame them. I know that it's the better option to say, okay, we need to get out of these cars right now because the market's going down. But it's a very tough decision for these dealers to make. So we got another question or comment. The government just called. They told me to tell you to shut up and buy an EV. Yes. So what we've seen is that our administration is pushing EVs pretty hard, and it's interesting because I think these manufacturers are not the happy. They can't really say much about it, but they're not the happiest about it. And the reason why I say that is because we've had some comments come out from CEO of Stellantis, and what he said is that, well, we're going to adjust with the market and what happens on the political sphere of things, because if a more liberal administration gets into office next term, then we'll push more to EVs. But if a more conservative administration gets into office next term, then we can pull back on our EV spending and our actual EV rollout. And what that says to me is that they don't want to go the route of the EV. They know it's not a money making endeavor right now. And for them to say that, well, it depends on the administration, says that they're not looking at their consumer. They're looking at what the administration is going to actually make them do in the EV space. And that's not the way that the market should work. And that's I hope that the CEOs will pay attention to the market more than they pay attention to the administration. I think that would be helpful for them. But thank you guys for watching this. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and have a good day. Where's the button? There's the button.